It's Shani on Shani Speaks Now. Hey there, Faith fam, and welcome to another edition of My Fill in the Blank Story, an interview series where I hope to amplify the voices of women as they share their reproductive health stories. This month's edition is my hysterectomy story, as my close friend, my homegirl, 𝙂𝙀𝙁𝙀𝙧𝙀, shares her experience of getting a total hysterectomy at only 35 years old. We dig deep, we get vulnerable, and hopefully you'll leave this interview feeling a little bit more educated and inspired. So please stay tuned and check it out. So first of all, welcome to everybody that is on live with us. For those of you that don't know me, because I know that I have a lot of people that are on here to support my good friend, my good sis, Patria. So for those that don't know me, my name is Shani Jones. I am located in the beautiful Orlando, Florida. But I am a host, I'm a speaker, I'm a content creator, I'm a realtor, I am a lover, I am a friend. I like long walks on the beach. No, but I'm just but I honestly created the series, which is called My Fill in the Blank series, because of my own personal issues in regards to women's reproductive health. For those of you who don't know me and don't know a little bit about my story, really in 2021, me and my husband were trying to start a family, I should say. And I was having some difficulties with that. And in my discovery of figuring out why I was not able to have a child, I found out that I had fibroids. I had to have fibroid surgery at the end of 2021. I was able to successfully have those removed, and by the grace of God was able to get pregnant, but suffered a miscarriage a couple months after that, and then found out that I had to have another surgery because there was another fibroid that was discovered. And in all the things that happened, I really felt like, why didn't I know about fibroids before? I also have endometriosis. Why didn't I know about that before? I knew people personally that had had miscarriages, but it never affected me on such a bigger level. So I was curious about what makes women go through this? How are they feeling when they go through this? And as I shared my story, I realized that there were so many women, and I didn't have to go far, women in my sphere, women that are my friends that have suffered through these things, that have had these experiences, and we're just not talking about it. And because I already am big on speaking and, sharing, I just said, all right, God, what do you want me to do with this experience? What do you want me to how do you want me to use it? And he wanted me to talk and share my story. And then in sharing my story, I started hearing stories of other women and what they've been going through and what's been happening in their lives. And this year, even though it's something that kind of came to me last year, I decided, you know what, I want to amplify the voices of women who are going through difficulties when it comes to their reproductive system. Even if they're not trying to have children, if they're women, they all have a reproductive system. We all have ways that our bodies were created and made to work. And sometimes they don't function the way that we thought they would. And I wanted to create community so we didn't feel weird. We didn't feel like we were alone. We didn't feel afraid to talk about it. We didn't feel like we should be ashamed. And that is really what this is all about. So this series called My Fill in the Blank Story basically is going to highlight reproductive issues that women may have. Everything from fibroids, endometriosis, issues that they have in delivery and labor, cancer. We're talking about hysterectomy today, postpartum depression, just all the things, PCOS that can happen with women, and just giving them a voice and an opportunity to share their stories. And as they share their stories, other people feeling like, yes, me too, I understand, but also hopefully allowing them to get it out. One of the things that really helped me in sharing about my fibroids, sharing about my surgery, sharing about my miscarriages, that as I talked about it more, I was learning more about myself. I was learning more about my pain. I was learning more about my healing, and it was helping me to heal. And I think that for a lot of women, they carry these burdens because they don't get a chance to talk about it. They have to stuff it. They have to keep it in. They aren't able to share it the way they want to. And I just wanted to be able to have a platform, and God has given me not only a platform through social media to do it, but he's blessed me with people who are willing to share their stories. So with that being said, I really want to be sure that those that are on here understand that this is a sensitive topic. This is something that is very vulnerable, very personal. So I pray that you all will give the respect that is due to the lady of the house that is sharing today. And just understanding that it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of bravery. It's not easy, and we're going to dig deep. My friend Patria's story here is a deep one. And I think that we'll all learn a lot of things. I think, and even us doing kind of the pre-interview prior to this, that I learned so much. And I'm grateful to be able to be doing this again. The first one that I did was with my sister Marika, who's on today, about her story where fibroids and fertility are concerned. And I'm glad that we're able to talk about hysterectomy now. So with all that being said, we will officially get started on the topic. So today's my fill in the blank story is my hysterectomy story. And my friend Patria here, just for a little background, me and Patria have known each other since I was 19 years old. Don't try to count the numbers. Don't try to figure out the ages. Okay,
25
just know we still look good. Okay, that's all you got to worry about. But we started working together. We went to the University of Central Florida here in Orlando. We started working and met at this place called 𝙁Education, which basically was a part of the wellness center at UCF. And we were sex health educators. Okay, we literally went around to campuses, to schools, middle schools, high schools at UCF, to different classes, and we shared how to take care of themselves sexually in a safe way. We also were HIV testing counselors, so we were literally at 19, when I think about it now, it blows my mind, at 19, 20 years old, we are having to tell people whether they were negative or positive for HIV. We also talked about body image, we talked about alcohol abuse, drug abuse, so that's how we met. When she first came in, I think I had been there maybe a semester before her, and we were supposed to I think I was supposed to be kind of training her. Whether that was really training or not, I believe she learned some things from me, but who knows? But we became partners in us being able to go around campuses. We were partners together a lot. So that forged a friendship that has lasted beyond the years. And I have to tell this story because to this day I laugh at myself. But, Patria is from Boston. She's from Lowell. You know what I'm saying? Her deep Boston accent may come out on the call. I don't know if it's substance or whatnot, but whatever. But I was training her and we were just talking, and all of a sudden she got a phone call. Apparently it was from her mother. And all of a sudden my girl goes into deep Spanish. Now my not so bright self, because I was taking Spanish at the time, I was like, oh, she must be in Spanish 5 because her Spanish is fire. No, she's Dominican. Okay, she's Dominican. That's why
I remember that.
That's why her Spanish is fire. Okay, I thought she was just black girl like me. She's Dominican. Okay, so that's why.
That was so
funny. People. But we've been tied to the hip ever since. She's not just a friend; she is family. She is very, very close to my parents, to my brother, to my sister, to my friends over the years. And I know that her family, especially her mommy's on the line, are watching. So to the 𝙁𝙤𝙧𝙦 family, I love you all. I appreciate you all for allowing your sister, daughter to be a part of my life for so long. But one of the things that I can say is me and Patria know a lot about each other. We have been on trips together. We have, done all the things. She was in my wedding. But one of the things that I honestly can say that I did not know fully, even though I do remember when she had her surgery, I do remember going by to visit her, is I didn't know the fullness of her story. And it wasn't until we talked roughly about a week or so ago that I really learned exactly what it was that she really went through. At the time, 5 years ago when this happened, she was 35 years old. This happened for her in February of 2018. I had just got engaged a month prior. She was in my wedding. There was so much going on. And even though I knew she was having surgery and I knew it was serious, I never knew all the things that were taking place. And we're going to dig deep into that. And I'm so glad, so happy that my friend is at a point now where she is healed from everything that took place, because it's a traumatic thing to go through that, and wants to share her story. And I don't think it's anything but God's timing. He does all things well, that we're able to dig into it. So first and foremost, I want Patria to introduce herself for those that don't know her on this call. Just share a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you are doing, where you're at, and then we will dig into your story, my friend.
Hey, everybody. Shan, I love you so much. Thank you for this opportunity. It's your girl, Patria 𝙁𝙧𝙦. I'm out here in Queens, New York. I won't be too specific, but I love me some New York. I love my Northeast. I am a lover and a friend, just as my homegirl said, love long walks on the beach as well. But I just want to shout out to, I see some of my friends, my nieces on here. I love you. I'm so glad. Thank you for everybody supporting. So I currently professionally, I'm a tailored engagement lead. I'm working at the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Again, health, girl, health is, it's been public health for the last
Yes,
That's right.
for the several
20
years.
years. So, but health has just been something that's always been a part. And, so this is where I'm at, and I want to take my story and tie it into what I do. And I'm looking forward to even sharing later on, what the future holds. But yeah, that's who I am. I just love God, love people, love life. I love dad jokes, but that could be another episode.
She does. No, it's not. It's not going to be another episode. But we do love you. We do love you. We love some of your dad jokes, some not so much, but that's okay. All right. We love you anyhow. So, in terms of Patria's story, so first and foremost, obviously this is called my hysterectomy story. And for me personally, and I know for maybe some other people on the line, anytime that I've ever heard of a hysterectomy, it's typically older women that have gotten them. Usually, they're at the end time of them having their children, they have their families, they no longer want to deal with their, menstrual cycles, all those different things. And, they've had a hysterectomy. So, a lot of the older women in my life that I know, that has been their story. Patria was probably the first person that I knew personally, and I don't think, again, that I understood the gravity of exactly what a hysterectomy fully curtailed. But at the time that she had one, she was 35. We all know that 35 is a super, super young age still for a lot of women. And also at the time, not married, not having any children. So I want her to tell us a little bit more about her surgery, because there's also different types of hysterectomies, and she had a total hysterectomy. So explain to us what the actual surgery was that you had and what that means in terms of your body and, how it is and how it functions now.
Yeah. So I had a total hysterectomy, and it was an abdominal cut. So that was a bikini line. And it's actually a total hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy, also known as removal of your uterus, cervix, and the fallopian tubes. Thankfully, and thank God, I could keep my ovaries. My ovaries were fine.
Right.
And so that was, it was done abdominally, and which meant, no more, when I was recovering, no more periods. But I still go through PMS motion since I have my ovaries, I have my hormones and everything. So ever since then, I've tracked, it's always the 10th, the 11th that I feel some type of way and go through all.
Right. So now that we know what took place, I want us to start from the beginning. Because a lot of times, a lot of the things that we go through starts at younger ages than we can even imagine. On the call that I had with my sister, we both shared how we got our cycles at 9 years old. A lot of people feel like menstrual cycles is a teenage issue, a teenage problem, and I assure you that it is not. It's just not. It starts at very young ages, and most times in your preteens. So let's start with your kind of cycles. What was it like for you? When did you get your cycle, and kind of what was it like for you in terms of your reproductive years, in terms of early beginnings of it?
Yeah. So I got my period around middle school. I don't remember if it was 11 or 12. And ever since I've had my period, it was 7 days. It was always long, 7 to 10 days, a full heavy load the first 5.
7 to 10 days? Dang.
Yeah, 7 to 10 days, rocking diapers. But anywho, really. And so, and it was painful. It was always cramps. And the cramps, the vivid memories I have of more high school years. Where it was just, that time came and the cramps were horrid. So it's Advil, it's the warm water bottle, the heating pads. And the thing is, my mom went through the same thing. Her sisters went through the same thing. So where, it's the natural remedies, you just go along with it. However, there was 1 year, I was about to be 15 or turning 15 already, that my period was ongoing for like 2 to 3 weeks. And I had to do. Yeah. And so obviously, right, there's something wrong with that, what's going on. And, so I had to see a gyno. We all know that gyno visits aren't, the most pleasant.
As an adult.
So therefore, that was slightly traumatic because I didn't want a speculum insert. I didn't know what was going on. It was uncomfortable. And really what I got was, you're developing puberty, the whole 9, it just happens. You might have a period that's 25 days. Sure, why not? So, yeah. And then I just kept living life. This just became part of the norm. And that was that.
And I think there's a couple things, because I think my first gyno appointment was around 13 or 14. It is a very traumatic thing, especially, you know, at that time, wasn't sexually active. So it's like, what is even happening?
Same.
Why are we here?
Right.
Why am I even having this pain? So, I mean, I know that that's a part of it. Did you feel like doctors and even your parents really understood, you know, what was happening? And what were any of your thoughts at that time that you were kind of going through that pain and having to have, that's really long cycles to have as well?
Yeah, well, because mom's been through it, right?
Yeah.
So that becomes, it's the norm.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to this day because I had some conversations recently about just parents taking us to the doctors, and both of my parents were very on point with that. We were part of a federally qualified health center, consistent with our shots, everything, including dental. So that was never an issue, but it was like, listen, if you're in pain, there's something going on, let me take you to the doctors, let's find out.
Yeah.
But, you know, there was nothing, I don't even remember so much, you know, who the physician was, but it just feels almost like it is what it is, you know.
Yeah.
And we just kept pressing and trying, doing what we can with what we got.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what happens with a lot of women is we go to doctors. They basically tell us it's normal. Unless you're kicking and screaming and, you know, doing the most, a lot of times they don't always take your pain seriously, especially women of color, if I'm being quite honest. That is one of the things, unfortunately, the medical profession has proven many times over that they just don't see our pain the same. It's as if they think we're super women. It's like, no, our pain is just as bad as women all over the world. It's still pain. So let's fast forward a little bit to the beginning of kind of where this started. You had to have surgery in February 13th of 2018. But when was it that you, from the time that you were kind of having these issues with your cycle, that you got to the point where you were like, okay, like something is going on for real. I really need to figure this out. What triggered that?
So, you know, yeah, fast forward. So just keep in mind, long periods all throughout the 20s, all into the 30s.
Yeah. And hold on, before we do that, did you have any medications? Like, were they giving you anything? Did they prescribe anything? So, got it.
No. My gynecologist, we would talk about these things, but I did not want to go on birth control.
Gotcha.
That was the one thing. Birth control was the only thing that was promoted for, right? Oh, you know, regulate your periods, less pain. But then there's the side effects of that. And I was just really staunch on, like, I don't want to be around here bloated and gaining weight. Correct. To be honest, you know, and in your 20s, it's like, nah, we don't want that. I'm like, no, I don't want that. Figure it.
Yeah. No, okay, good. And same. That was what was basically told to my mom at 13, and my mom wasn't with it either. So same. Just put up with the pain, pop a million pills, and hope that the pain goes away. All right. So now, going back.
So it was in 2017. I can't remember exactly. I know I have the date of the ultrasound, which was April 2017. But earlier that year, and even maybe within the past year, I kept feeling bloated. And it just, you know, the PMS symptoms are still there. But this bloatingness was like, why are you still bloated after your period or before? And you know, so it's like, that's weird. Well, years prior, I had gastritis. That was like in 08, 09. So I had an endoscopy, right? And so I'm like, oh man, maybe that's what's coming back. Like, oh, okay, so I should see a gastro. I went to see the gastro. And actually, and I believe she was a nurse practitioner, I was like, yeah, I need an endoscopy because this is what I'm feeling. This is what's going on.
Because you thought it was
she
more
looked at me.
Digestive.
Yes, I thought, yeah, definitely. And so she looked at me, and she was a white woman, and I see her now, and I'm grateful. She just looked at me, listened, and she's like, you know what? Maybe we can definitely do the endoscopy, but let's get you an ultrasound. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah, maybe let's get an ultrasound. So it was there. Because she sent me to get an ultrasound was when I found out that I had 7 fibroids.
That's crazy. And that's the part of your story that I didn't know until we talked, because I knew that you had the hysterectomy story, but I didn't know that you had fibroids until we talked. And it was 7 fibroids that were found?
7. Yes. So the largest one being 6.1 centimeters, but I saw later, I think I saw something around 7 centimeters.
But I had an apple, or like maybe like an apple or so, or something like that.
Yeah. So something, along those lines. And so, and just to explain the 7 where they were, so 3 were pedunculated, which also means that they had a stalk, so they were sticking out. 3 were intramural, so that means they were embedded in the uterine lining. And 1 was what we call subserous, which is it pushes outside of the uterus and into the pelvis. So it looks almost, when you look up the graph, it looks like one's kind of floating. Yeah. So just the thought of 7 fibroids, and when I think now that I can talk and, just kind of go back, but also move forward, it's like 7 fibroids, not the size of little braids, just something there. Trying to process that, I don't know what was going on in my mind at that time, but I was like, we got to find options and figure this out.
And not just 7 fibroids, but how they work, because again, I had fibroids, but all of mine were attached to my uterus. So in terms of surgery, it was a matter of just severing them from my uterus. But when you have 3 that are implanted in your uterus, that means that if you were to have some sort of surgery, they're having to cut into your uterus to basically pluck those out. Now having the experience that I had and knowing how difficult it was just for the ones that were attached, that's the sound of that is crazy to me. One, the amount of them, the size of them, but also just how they were attached to your body. Yeah. So you get that news. One, what are you thinking? How are you feeling? And kind of what were your next thoughts or steps?
So this is where, one of the points that I want to bring out. So obviously this news didn't come where everything was peachy keen everywhere else in life. Yeah. And I think that's something to keep in mind as well. So, I'm 34, I'm finding this out, I'm in a relationship, and I'm in a job that I love, but it's stressful. Yeah. And I'm in a relationship that, maybe not maybe at the time, right? So it's not, so we have relationship, work, and my health. Correct. And so all that is like, okay, so now I'm like, of course, I'm talking to my partner, and, he was great in the fact that he wanted to make sure, let's find all the alternatives. He was very big on natural. Again, still didn't want to get on birth control pill, but I ended up doing it for a couple of months. I just couldn't take them and be on track and be on time. I said, this ain't going to work. And I just was like, forget that. So I was just like, what am I going to do? Let's see. What does my gyno say? Let's get a second opinion. Yeah. And I heard of the options, the myomectomy, and then there was the hysterectomy. And my gyno was like, maybe I could do a little something where you could salvage your uterus, but you have to have children quick if you want to do that. Friends, like, what if you're in a relationship you're not even sure about? Correct. And you're like, oh, well, hey, buddy, let's just have kids real quick. This is going to happen. And even, no, we're not doing that, and I'm not putting myself in that. And so a lot of it was just trucking along, figuring it out, and then making the decision for the hysterectomy. And to be honest, Shan, not until recently I realized that I kind of I blocked out the end of 2017 and through my surgery. So to be honest, I can't even tell you because of everything that was going on, the stress.
Trauma. It was trauma. When you are stressed and you're having to go through some sort of crisis like that, your trauma, and a way that your body responds to trauma is it tries to block you from having to experience it. And I think that's the one thing that sometimes people don't understand is life is continuing to life. So you may have this one major thing, but that doesn't negate everything that you still have to deal with, especially when you're an adult. You have to adult. Yeah. So, you're trying to kind of juggle certain things. At that time when you got that diagnosis, obviously, you're trying to find, natural ways to deal with it, which, let's be quite honest, ain't no natural way to deal with these things. There's just not. There's only so many teas you can drink, so many supplements you can take. You can turmeric and ginger and, time your way down, but it's not taking these things away. And in terms of, your relationship possibly having an effect on kind of the decision that you made, obviously, or at least I'm hoping that your doctor kind of explained with the different surgeries that you can choose, what your options were going to be moving forward in the future in regards to children. Because obviously having a hysterectomy opposed to having a myomectomy and having them removed could drastically change what your life is looking like in terms of a family in the future. What was your doctor either saying to you at that time, or what was that conversation, or what were your thoughts about how that may look for you in the future?
So that was interesting because, again, I was in a relationship where it was like we had the discussion of having children, not having children. He had children. So it was like, hey, It's cool. Like I was at a place where I told my doctor, I was like, I'm not sold out, like I have to have children, but I also wasn't like, I never want to have kids. See, and that's where it's different. Like if I never want to have kids, my mind space, my heart, everything would be different, but that wasn't the sold out place that I was at. So, you know, of course, what's in the future is, since my ovaries were good, it's like, okay, maybe you can freeze your eggs, you know, you could always adopt, foster, that if you come, you know, if that's what happens. But yeah, so the freezing of eggs, you know, and I know we'll talk about it, didn't come until last year that I, you know, let me see what that was like and I can share that. But yeah, other than that, I was just like, all right, well, I mean, we gotta do something about it. I know that I was talking to my mom, and I know that she was saddened because I have an aunt that went through the same, and she was just, you know, still in shock. One thing that I do want to highlight, so we talked about adulting and life, but the other thing that I did, to this day, I wish I didn't, and so I tell people not to. Don't close out your community. Don't, the innermost folks, even if at the end of the day I was gonna have to have the surgery, but you know, some of my closest best friends didn't know the ins and outs of what I was experiencing because I just kept it moving. And you know, I had my boyfriend, and I'm just like, you know, doing what I need to do, but it wasn't the wisest decision. You know, so that is something to just to put out there as an aside.
And I'm glad
but yeah,
because I do remember at that time, I mean, again, we've been friends for years, and I do remember what I only heard was about the surgery. So I didn't know the prognosis. Like I said, I didn't know fibroids. I didn't know how deep it was. I just remember hearing, I have to have surgery. This is what I'm gonna have to have. This is when I'm gonna have to have it. So, you know, the decision was already made. And not to say that your community necessarily has to weigh in. It's your personal decision. But I think just having the support and not feeling alone is a huge thing. I know for me and my surgeries, I didn't tell everyone, but I had pointed people that I did tell just to allow them to pray, you know, just to make sure that they knew, because it is very emotional. Society will make you feel like there's something wrong with you when your body doesn't function the way they think it's supposed to. You're supposed to, as a woman, at a certain time, you get your cycle, you know, you become a woman, you should be able to, at the point, you know, be able to procreate and do what your body is quote unquote supposed to do. So when it doesn't do those things, or it's off base, it causes a lot of alarms. And also society is not always kind, because they expect once you get to a certain age, the questions come. Once you're married, well, when are you going to have kids? Or do you know, where your baby's at? People don't understand the ins and outs and the intricacies. You don't know what someone's going through. You don't know what their process is. You don't know if they've already tried. In your case, they can't look at you and tell that you had a hysterectomy. So it's like you're asking questions and you're bringing up conversations that is a very sensitive thing. And I think if anything, I've learned that the most, of how to tailor conversations with people in regards to their reproductive health and also just family. It's not so much where your kid's at, why you ain't got no kids. Is, well, do you ever see yourself starting a family? Because if that's a no, the conversation ends there, and we move on to what's the weather like in your state. You know what I'm saying? Like,
exactly.
We move forward.
You know, you're saying society, and let's just go. We come from Caribbean, you know, culture.
Caribbean background.
So
correct.
Yes, Caribbean background, exactly. So that's a whole nother shebang. And even to this day, you know, love them, you know, grandmas and all them, you know, coming from the old school, but it's still like, you know, you gotta have kids, kids. And I'm like, okay, let's look at the bigger picture.
Correct.
And I was like, and essentially, thank God, and that's another thing too, faith, baby girl. Listen, if it
don't go anywhere without it.
And that's something that I'm grateful for too, just still sticking close to my Lord, even though I was like, what is going on and why is this happening to me? This is not what I planned. I was supposed to be married at 25, my first child at 27, the next one at 29, and here I am, 40 and fine. So, you know what I'm saying? So
yes, you are. Okay.
Right? So, you know, I'm like, God, what's going on? But nonetheless, this has been an opportunity, right, to just kind of like, hey, you know, stop asking so many questions, and why don't you hear the story, and this is what happened. And also to just be like, you know what, this also brought my mother and I closer, because my mother had a hysterectomy as well. But again, like you said, later, after she already had us, you know, all this jazz. But one thing she always reminded me that I always tell her as a child is that I always said I wanted to adopt kids. And so I'm like, and she always brings that to my remembrance. It's like, don't worry, you know, because that's not the only way to start a family. So those are things that, I'm like, I'm grateful and I get to see the other side of those little things, but I don't want to move too, fast forward. But yeah.
I love you, friend. Okay. No.
Yeah, I
Keep
know.
it together, Jesus. Okay. But I mean, that's a real thing, because I think sometimes people glorify adoption, especially if you went to a foreign country and got a child from somewhere far away. But there's everyday kids down your street who are in foster homes, or who are orphans, or who need that guidance, or their families can't do it. Their families maybe were able to have children, but for financial reasons, or maybe it's just a toxic environment, they can't. So that is a huge point to bring up. Adoption is definitely an option, whether you can have children or not. I know people who physically have been able to have children and still make that option, and even if you can't. So I'm glad that you brought that, and I'm glad that your mom, who I love, brings that to your remembrance, because that also gives us a certain semblance of hope, regardless of your specific, situation. So, okay. So you went to your first doctor, getting back into your story.
Yeah.
And I believe you also got a second opinion, right?
Yeah.
And the second opinion said what?
The same, you have to get a hysterectomy. You can try the myomectomy, but still. And at the end, my gyno did say when I went, because I ended up staying with my first, my gynecologist who I've had seen consistently. And, he was like, I'll salvage what I would love to salvage what I can, let's see what's in there. But again, the ones that are in the lining, that's what makes it interesting. So, we go with the surgery. I set up and I actually went back to the hospital where I used to work, and I was able to see one of the guest services people who was the sweetest. And I remember you asking me, like, what was that day like? Yeah. And to be honest, I see it as kind of cold, because that's my first real surgery. Yeah. I had 2 wisdom teeth removed, but everything with my mom was there. I can't remember if my brother and my boyfriend at the time were there, but, I was just like your video, you're laid up, whatever. And then next thing you know, I'm out of the surgery. Yeah. I had to be in the hospital for 2 days until I could use the bathroom.
Was your surgery?
God, I don't remember. Okay. It was in the morning. And then, I don't remember.
It's okay.
But what I will tell you, what I will tell you is that the doctor came in, and I'm not going to show y'all the picture, but what I will tell you is that what he took out looked like a rotisserie chicken.
I saw it.
I
remember. I can literally vividly still see the image of it in my mind.
Yeah. And, I just know that my mom was like, what? We were all like, that was in there? You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, even now it's just like, what? So, fast forward, one thing that I will tell you, and I said I would write this in a will in my medical papers, I ain't doing a catheter. The traumatic, the surgery was something. The catheter was more traumatic for me, to be honest. I ain't even gonna lie. That thing there was something about that till this day, but that's a whole nother episode. So I was discharged. I recuperated in my parents' house, who have a peaceful place. Anybody who needs recuperation, they're open. Nice healing, beautiful backyard.
You'll get some good plantains. You'll get some good fish. You know what I'm saying? Mom will hold it down.
So I was there, and 2 weeks in, they weren't there, and my dog was outside. I was using the bathroom, and that was when I cried the deepest cry out of my soul. And it was just like an anger, a sadness cry that it was really unto God, because I was like, what just happened? Yeah. 2 weeks, and it's like, what just really happened? And why was that in there? And, all the questions, like, what are we doing? Like, what about my life? Like, what does this look like? Yeah. So that's 2 weeks after. And then
now, real quick, when you moved to that, in that moment when you kind of had that breakdown, was there any level of was there a feeling of either regret, or do you think that was just the first time where it hit you what actually took place?
It was more of that. It hit me what took place, because I don't know that I could regret, because again, there was so much happening in life as well. So
it was medically what both doctors said should be done. Yeah.
And I think in part it's shock too. That's wow. This is where we're at.
Yeah.
So then I was recuperating 4 to 6 weeks. I was out of work for sure for 4 weeks. And then I slowly went back in And, one of the things I remember, I took a picture because I had lost a couple of pounds and I wasn't bloated. So I was like, yay, cool, look at this. And then, just living life, and wow, you don't get your period. Woo, obviously that's a big deal. Hey, beautiful. I see my other nieces here too. And I love you. And so, so I just kept moving, still in the relationship, your wedding, which was a big deal. 2018 was a big deal, period.
No, it really was. And hold on, before we go forward, I want to kind of double back to your cycles because, I hate my cycle. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know too many people or women, that are in the reproductive ages where they're still getting their cycle, that they're like, yes, love it. Can't wait for it to come again this month. Amen. Like, it's just kind of one of those things where, when we get to Heaven to see Eve one day, we really gonna square up and be like, yo, sis, really? That's what we're doing? However, before my last surgery, I had to take hormones to prevent my cycle from coming in order for me to have the surgery, because in order for them to remove the last fiber that I had, I couldn't be on my cycle. And I had to do hormone therapy before and after. And there was 1 month where I did not get my cycle. And it was to me, which, of course, with my journey, I'm trying to have a child, but it was so weird. For you, what was it like when you were not getting your cycle? What was your thoughts? Because for a lot of people, that screams your womanhood. But what was your thoughts when that wasn't happening for you anymore?
I'm like, well, you should still carry pads for other people. And that was my thought, to be honest. I was like,
that's why I don't have this, okay? Thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm like, I have to make sure I have these. And after a while, I just didn't have them. But, I was like, wow, so you don't get these.
You're saving money. I just want to let you know that, because these things expensive, okay? Why they're so expensive, I don't know. But praise God, that's one part of your budget that you can put towards your vacations, okay?
Right. But yeah, so to be honest, that was my thought. Every time I looked in my bag and stuff, I'm like, just make sure you have these for others. Right. And that's it. Yeah.
And that's a blessing, because I know for some people it could have been like a mourning thing, like mourning that aspect of things. However, you also didn't have that pain of any of that, so I'm sure there was definitely some rejoicing where that
it just I'm still like it's the emotional, the hormones of just like going through the feelings, all the hormonal stuff. Like I still PMS, I still get hot and bothered, you know what I'm saying? Like so, but ain't nothing.
So now you're at a place, obviously your surgery happened 5 years ago as of February 13th. And most recently, is when you decided that you wanted to kind of share your story. What has the healing process been like for you? And what did you have to go through to get to a point where, not only were you, I don't want to say content with it, but you're at a point of peace with it. And then you wanted to also share something that is, really a private issue that so many people can weigh in on what they think you could have done, should have done, what's going to happen, all those different things. How did you get to, this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, let me tell you that Chapter 36 in New York City has been the best move. And as we said, God's timing is where it's at. I had wanted to be up here since 2005. And I feel like, baby girl, it would have been a whole different person, a whole different animal. So moving forward, mind you, I was in counseling throughout this whole whole thing, and really focusing on other things. I can't recall a lot of my talk about the surgery, but it wasn't until I moved up here that because of my faith and the Holy Spirit and that relationship, it's like, hey girl, so this is you, single, out here. What are we doing? How are we going to grow? What are we going to do? So when I came up here, I got on Medicaid for a little bit. I started to see a doctor. Even the doctors here, first of all, one of the medical assistants was trying to fight folks in Florida because they're like, what? You did this? Why did you get a hysterectomy? Why did they let you do that? Yeah. Like, they just thought, first of all, you were so young. What do you do? What's going on? They just wanted to fight. I was like, hey, I'm home. But,
that was like my mom. She wanted to fight for you as well.
Just, what's going on? Couldn't there be other methods, other ways? And so that in itself would bring up tears, right? Would bring up thoughts. Yeah. And so there was people that I've met along the way in the medical field that would just really, there was one lady, Jamaican, of course, that she just encouraged me, and because I would just cry. You know, the minute you're asking me about the surgery, I just cry, and I'm like, what are we doing? And it wasn't until then, too, that I was like, yo, you're grieving a loss. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I had to, like, I didn't think about that. These are things, again, if you experience trauma, you go through something, you put that somewhere and you don't revisit. But this moving up here was also, it's part of a healing journey. It's part of a new chapter. And with that comes, like, you do have to revisit some things. Yeah. So in 2021, Revive Tampa, just a shout out, they do a women's conference. Nice. And, you know, COVID was around, by the way, if we forgot about the pandemic. So everything was virtual. And I was in this place and they were doing their women's conference. And the pastor began to pray. She said something, but what I will tell you is I began to bawl, but rejoice, because in my spirit, that whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, the Lord's like, there's purpose in this. Yeah. I never had to go through this for no reason. And so he's like, I want you to begin to pray, because you are going to address everything that's women's reproductive health. I don't know how. Yeah, like that was me. And he's like, just pray. That's all I'm asking you, is to pray for every woman. And that's what it's been until today, like just praying. I don't know what things look like. And so I'm like, okay, so there's purpose in this story. And what happened, you know, and what's going to come out of this. And so, so that's been like the little confirmations along the way, the people, even, you know, funny enough, like I said, I'm 40 and fine. The dating, I've told men up front, because what I'm not going to do, boo, you ain't going to fall for me. And then I'm going to tell you 2 years later that this can't happen. Yes. So, hey, this is who I am. This is what I've been, and this is what I've been through. And they've been chill. They've been like, you know, wow. Yeah, you know, thank you for sharing. Sorry that happened. You know, if things were to pan out, we just do something with it, and whatever. But I don't.
That is such a, not to cut you off, but one, that's such a adult thing to do and an honest thing to do, because in a world where, I mean, I'm not in that world anymore, but in a world where people put on lots of facades and they don't always, they're not honest like that from up front. The fact that you give men the opportunity to choose and understand where you are and who you are from the jump, to know whether they want to move forward. Yeah. Because for some men, having children, having a namesake is super important. So the fact that you give them that option, and it seems like they are also being honest with you in their reactions, is a beautiful thing, because that's a very vulnerable thing to have to let somebody know up front, and you don't know how they're going to react, and you don't know how their reaction to what you're sharing is going to affect you. So I'm glad that you put that out there. Yeah. And real quick too, I think I remember you telling me that in 2020 is also, because you brought up the whole idea of sharing with men about, you know, children, that 2020 was probably the first time you really thought about, like, okay, I do believe that I want children, correct?
Yes. So that was the other thing too. So, you know, again, like, I wasn't staunch on saying no to kids, but I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I have to have kids or nothing else. So I'm in the in-between, right? But I'm like, man, I still wanted that option. Yeah. And so I just had that in the back of my mind, you know, as I think I mentioned before, everybody's kids are my kids. So I have a lot of nieces and nephews. But, you know, I'm like, what does that look like? So, which is why I'm like, I'm obviously not opposed to men, you know, that have kids, you know, whatever have you. And so, but it wasn't until last year that I said, what is this whole thing about freezing eggs? I'm like, should I consider that? What is that about? And thankfully, I have a couple of friends that knew of friends that have done it. And I got a new doctor. I got a new gyno last year and a new internist, thanks to my cousin, who she's been seeing these women for a while. So I mentioned it to the internist, and she's like, you know what? She's like, oh, there's a hormone called the AMH, which you told me about, to see the age of like your ovaries. She's like, I'll test you for that. And here's this doctor's name. You know, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm like, all right, so let me do the research. Yeah. You know, I shared with my mother, I shared with yours, and it's like, you know, well, why is it that you're doing this? My mom asked, and I was like, because I don't want to be left like, oh, I never considered. I didn't go through all the avenues, find out. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, there was one night I was in bed, and I'm like, Lord, am I crazy for trying to do this? And it's like, no, you know, you're doing what you got to do. And I was like, I want you to walk. You're not walking this alone. Yeah. So I said, all right, let's see what we can do. And long story short, I had my first transvaginal ultrasound. So in a plug, why aren't we going to the gyno and not just getting pap smears, but ultrasounds.
Thank you.
Like consistent.
That is exactly, you can't find fibroids, you can't find endometriosis, you can't find issues with your uterus with just a cervical check that they do every month, once a year. You have to have ultrasounds. It needs to be a part of women's reproductive health checks, period. You're not going to see anything without that. And I don't know why that's not a part of it.
Yeah,
so
and
I'm glad you brought it up.
Something else. When I went to the new gyno, she did the ultrasound, and she's like, "Yo, your ovaries look good, whatever have you." This gentleman did the transvaginal ultrasound to see, where, I guess he was looking for, I don't know if the follicles or see where the ovaries were. But long story short, my AMH hormone is a little lower than normal, but it was like a 0.99. It's really 1.06 for a 40-year-old woman. Fine. Mm-hmm. And he felt like he could pull 3 to 4 eggs out of each ovary.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, cool, good to know. But guess what? It's not like, oh, I can pull these eggs, it's gonna work, everything is great. No, those eggs may not survive. It's a whole to do. And I remembered that I have a family member of mine close that she's gone through this whole process, and I was like, man, I can probably talk to her and ask more questions. But I'm like, at least you know what's up, and you also know that it's 15 grand. Okay, because my insurance was not like, I'm not covering that for you.
And I'm praying that more, I've seen, at least recently, even with my personal insurance, it wasn't until this year where fertility treatments, period, were even a part of plans. Those were all things that were, not. And I think, and I'm hoping that things like freezing your eggs becomes a new thing as well, because one, I will say I give it up to entertainment in terms of, I've seen a lot of shows that focus on women where they're actually talking about, like, women in the episodes are freezing their eggs, and that's becoming a thing, because I think, we're both millennials. We're at an age and stage where, unlike our mothers, where it was a lot more of a thing to, get married, have your families. I think more millennial women are making choices to either get married later because they really are focused on more on their careers. They have some of their own. So freezing their eggs has become a real thing, because they realize, look, I'm not getting married in my 20s. I'm probably not even getting married in my early 30s. So if I want to have a family one day and that's something I want to do, this may be something that I need to consider. So I'm hoping that medical professionals take note and that they will make it something that is a lot more inexpensive for women to be able to do, because it's important. And essentially, in your case, in freezing your eggs, if any of them are viable, you would be able to use a surrogate, essentially, to, if you want to.
That's how that, Yep. And that was part of the process of where I went. Like, they do the A through Z, which was cool. Yeah. I was like, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And so. Yeah, so there was that last year. So again, these little things too, not only part of the healing, the talking, the walking through, the accepting and saying out loud, wow, this is how I feel. This is what I wanted to do. Or this is what I was hoping for. Maybe there's this option, and getting the support from others and just walking through, even if it's, you tried it, it didn't work, but you still did something.
Yeah.
And to your point, like, hoping medical professionals take notice, this is why we're doing this. You know what I'm saying? This is even all the more why I'm like, we got to keep talking. We got to keep, pushing, because this just isn't cute to wait this long.
It doesn't make any sense. Now, before I get into kind of where you are now in terms of like your journey and what you want to do, I do see a lot of conversation going on. This last conference I see said women's health should not be so unaffordable, which is true. I see a lot of people who, when you mentioned the price of freezing eggs, they had like the bug eye emoji because it's ridiculous. But I wanted to kind of put it out there for anyone who may have any questions for Patria about her story, if you've been listening, about the process of anything, if this is, something that you can relate to. I wanted to open it up that if anyone has any questions, they can either, put the questions in the chat, or there is, I believe, a little question icon that you can use, and I will check for those questions. So I wanted to put that out there first, but while I kind of wait to see if anyone has any questions, one of the things you mentioned, obviously, is that the healing that started taking place around, 2021, and especially last year, in terms of God allowing you to see, like, everything you're going through is not in vain. There's a purpose for it. You've been in the health related and public health related, atmospheres literally since you were a teen, because I knew you, because we were both, doing, and that wasn't even, my major was radio, television, broadcasting. How in the world did I become a sex health educator? Only the Lord knows. But it allowed me to meet you, so amen to that. But this is something that's been a passion of yours for a long time. What is your kind of your goals now, your mission now in terms of using your story and wanting to get the word out about those things?
So my mission now is I am going back to school, and so one of the things, and that's for me personal. You know, I was talking to my spiritual mom, which is your mom, and I tell people, like, the schooling, yeah, that may open up some doors, but it's always been something that I've wanted, you know, for growth and just things that are health related. But I'd like to. It may be that the master's in public health will focus on either community health or health disparities, but I'm going to tailor it to women's reproductive health system. I may even consider my doctorate, thanks to, I see, Clarissa, my coworker and friend, and other people that I've surrounded myself with that just made it seem like it's nothing. And, you know, when you have that support, like, it's pretty cool. You know, it's just like, you can do a lot of things. So shout out to all my cheerleaders. That's been so awesome.
I have a lot of them.
Yeah, and that's been, listen, this is, thank you. And so going back to school is one thing, but, you know, church faith has been something, women have been something to me. And so if it just means one-on-one sharing my story, praying and referring, you know, if it means women's group, whatever it is that I could provide a safe space where people can ask questions and have, you know, share their story, then I'm done. Like that's my whole thing. And just bringing awareness. Like once you have your show and you're on the OWN network and you're on all these channels, then, you know, I'm out there like, come on. I'm like, hey, let's talk about this. And thank you. Hey, Lucia, thank you so much, Dr. Patria. But you know, I have friends that are doing such amazing things, and all our work, believe it or not, it intertwines. And so that's the exciting part too, because we all can help one another. And I love that God has placed me in a community where folks are either actors, writers, producers, radio broadcasters, like doing all the things. And then behind the scenes, you know what I'm saying? Doing either legal work, filming, whatever it is, we all work together. And I'm like, and that's what I'm looking to see. How can I pull all these resources together? And how can I have women know, like, listen, there is more, there is great, whatever you've been through, this surgery, be it the PCOS, the endometriosis, all these things that are trying to block or hold you up from something, it's not, there's more. It's not, that's not the end. And we got to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, I love that. I love that for you. I love you, my friend. And I'm grateful because I think everything is timing. You know, I wanted to do this last year. Last year wasn't the best year for me to do this. Last year I had, you know, roughly recovered from a surgery, had another surgery, and had a miscarriage. So probably not the best year to try to do something like this, but it's where it was seated. And I think, let me see. Someone had a question. I'm curious about what y'all think education for young women around fibroids, hysterectomies, etc., should look like in an ideal world, either in schools, community, and culture. Woo! Thank you for that question. That's a good question.
That's Lucia.
So before I even answer that question, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I do know that I saw last week in a couple of my friends' stories, and I think one person posted on their page that in the state of Florida, which is where I am and where Patria used to be, that they are making a rule that girls in 4th and 5th grades are not going to be able to speak about their periods, which is weird to me because I was in 4th grade when I got my cycle, that they want it to be essentially something that is only spoken of, you know, in the home, or they have to be in middle school, which is so weird to me because if little girls are having their cycles, why they can't speak about it at school, I do not know. It's weird. But I think in terms of, well, you know what? I'll let Patria answer first since she's my guest, and then I'll give my opinion in terms of where I think that those conversations should happen in terms of talking about the fibroids, talking about hysterectomies in schools, community, and culture. Such a good question. Thank you, Lucia.
Yeah, and I see Maya has a question there too. But Shani, you know, I was like, let's go curriculum. Remember you created the abstinence curriculum? That was one thing, but just creating curriculum where this was an idea that I spoke to someone at work last week, either just using programs such as sports or different programs where girls can come together to have these conversations. And so that's where I'm like, oh, there needs to be more curriculum, more things like, for example, I grew up in Girls Incorporated, which actually I should find out what they're doing there, because if they're banning these conversations that need to be had within families and need to be had in schools, then what's a way around it? We will always find a way around it. The system will not, hold us. So, I just immediately saw a curriculum where it can be of empowerment, encouragement for young ladies, and you just insert these conversations there. And it's something that I've seen done, and that I believe Shani and I have been part of, and that can be created.
And to me, I think it's twofold. So I think one part of it is having a way to educate parents, because I was, me and my sister talked on our call. I was super blessed because my mom was a social worker. She also was, she worked for DCF for years. She was a teen parent teacher where she taught young girls who had children in high school how to take care of their children. That's not the norm. I am very well aware that how me and my sister and my brother, even though obviously he's a guy, but I'm very well aware that how we were raised is not the norm. And I didn't realize that until I was older. But I think one part of it is allowing parents not to be sometimes the ones who are taboo about it. I know for us being women of faith, and I know for me growing up in quote unquote church culture, abstinence is preached. That's great. I do understand that there's a point and a purpose for abstinence, but there's also the knowing that not all children are going to choose that.
Absolutely
also, we have, unfortunately, the idea that not all women or not all children are protected. So sometimes that's not an option because they're abused. So we have to start having these conversations where parents themselves aren't striking either fear, or it's a weird thing, or they don't know how to talk to their children about it. So I think I don't know what that way would be, whether it be, classes for parents, training for parents, a place where parents can go to get those sorts of information, groups for parents to be able to have those things, maybe the same, organizations where young girls can go. Maybe there's the girls are going one place and their parents are going another place, or they're having these group conversations together. So I think it's a part of it's educating parents. And I do think our generation will be a lot more open to that because of what we've seen. And then I think a lot of it goes back to what you were saying. It is curriculum, it is training, but I think a lot of it is just making the norm. If you can make other things in television, in cartoons, on commercials, a thing, this should be a thing. Most young girls, unless there's something, terribly wrong in terms of their reproductive system or their health, or, something's just not going correct, they're going to cycle. They're going to have their period. They're going to go through these motions. They may one day want to have children, or they may, be sexually active. Whatever the case may be, it needs to be a part of life. And it shouldn't be something that's hidden or restricted from them knowing, because it's knowledge. And I think a lot of times people are so scared that if you talk to your kids about sex, if you talk to them about cycles, or if you tell them something weird, that it's going to want them to do something more. And it's going to educate them, because if you're not talking about it, guess who is? YouTube, Google, and their friends that don't nobody know nothing. And that's basically what's happening a lot of times. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. So Lucy, I hope that answered a little bit of your question, and also just kind of puts the conversation out there, because that is what we're doing. That's why we're doing this is to start having conversations. And we're having these conversations. There's adults that can't talk about these things. I'm sorry. It's just, it's, it's sad. There's adults that can't have these conversations. So it's hard to think that our children should be equipped to be able to have those conversations, but they should. They should really know these things. And then, did you say that you saw another question, Takira?
Yes, Maya, so good to see you. So she said, can I speak to self-advocacy? My sister-in-law just found 4 fibroids on her uterus. Next follow-up isn't until May. How can she advocate better for herself? The first thing I'll say is, one of the things that I've learned and seen is the keep knocking on doors and asking questions. So, now it's just like, who do you know? Like, do you have a good doctor? Do you have a good gyno? Keep sharing your story. And if that person's not going to listen, who's the next person? And until you get to that next person, like, you'll have to continue to share your story and keep saying, this isn't right. I don't feel well. I need to be seen. I don't know how this is going to affect me. unfortunately, right now, that's where we're at. Like, I feel like we have to keep telling and knocking and knocking and knocking and talking to one another, so it can be like, hey, I actually do have somebody, or let me refer you here, or here are these resources. That's one thing that I've seen as far as for advocating.
Yeah. I think it's that, and I think it's also holding doctors accountable. And I'll share personal experience. I've been going to the same OB for years. Prior to going to her, I was going to a PA because she's a bigger doctor and I wasn't able to get in with her first. So when I was going to the PA, they did an ultrasound on me because I was having so much pain in my early 20s, but they didn't find anything. After that, I started seeing this new doctor, but they didn't do any new ultrasounds. They didn't do anything. And I am not a complainer. I have a very high pain threshold and tolerance. Even if I'm in pain, I keep moving like a lot of women do. You know, there's this whole trope of like the strong Black woman or the strong woman of color or whatever the case may be. And I think sometimes we take too much pride in that because I'm good. I want to be soft. Can I be the soft Black woman? But I remember when I finally found out about my fibroids, my doctor gave me a referral to a reproductive specialist because we were trying to have children. And it was the specialist, just in conversation, they didn't even see me yet, who was like, oh, based on what you're explaining, you sound like you have endometriosis. You might even have a fibroid. How do you go to a doctor for 10 years plus and you have one conversation with a reproductive specialist who hasn't even had an ultrasound done yet, and they're being able to figure that out? Now, my doctor then felt bad. So now she's my biggest champion. She also did my surgery for my fibroid because now she felt a burden on her because she realized, shoot, I missed something. And I think that's also part of it.
Yeah.
Going to your doctors, getting second opinions, and going back to the original person that you may have seen that you have known for years. Because I still trust her. I believe that, you know, doctors, they are human beings. They're not perfect. Yeah. They're going to make mistakes. Right. And now she's my greatest advocate because she realizes I missed something. But I also realize I have to be more vocal about my pain.
Yeah.
I'm not a nasty person. I'm not going to be the person cussing you on the phone because I think sometimes that does get results. But why should you have to stoop to that level to get a result? I should be able to tell you I'm in pain in a normal tone of voice and you listen to me. I shouldn't have to be yelling and screaming and telling you and threatening. And if you don't, it shouldn't be that. So, I mean, that's a little disheartening, but I think it's really going back and saying, hey, this is another point of opinion that I found. Now that we know this, what are we going to do about it? How are you going to help me help myself? And also, as crazy as it sounds, if it gets too crazy, maybe starting to bring in, like you mentioned, you have people that you know in legal systems. It may get to the point where that has to be, you know, the case. I know another big thing, which this call isn't about that, is that women that post-delivery, some of them are making it home. They're having their babies and things are happening after they have their children, and nurses aren't listening to them. Doctors aren't listening to them. They're encouraging, things are happening, and they're dying because they're not able to have someone advocate, or their husbands or their significant others are trying to advocate for them, and people aren't listening. So I think that's a lot of it, maybe making our voices a little louder, a little stronger, and holding people accountable to do what they say they're supposed to do, what they vowed in Hippocratic laws and oaths to do.
Yeah, I also like the idea too, and this is where going back to my job of community health workers, they will go with you as well and advocate for you. So you don't, you know, we should, definitely do the self-advocacy, but who's that other champion too that will walk with you? And community health workers, are amazing. Community health workers are amazing for that. So I would recommend even finding a community health worker to go with.
Good. Well, if there aren't any other questions, because we have been on for an hour, child, we can talk. I knew we would. But is there any other questions that people may have for Patria, or that they may have about this? I see a comment actually from my sister. She says, make it a big deal. Don't try to play strong if you're in pain. Give them the real so they will be more prone to help. And that's true. Like, listen, if you got to play the wee little lamb, do what you got to do to get what needs to get done. But I don't think I see any other questions. So before we close out, Patria, is there anything else that you want to just share with the audience, either about your story or what you want to do, or even just give encouragement to any other women who may find themselves in a situation where they're having to make a health decision that could prevent them from you know, having a family in the way that they traditionally thought they were able to?
I think first, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to everyone who's here. Please share this. I think it starts with the talking. It starts with knowing that you are not alone. And it also knowing that there are options. It may not be, the one that you want or the one that will fit, because if you have 7, some folks have had maybe the one large fibroid, but that takes up the whole thing. It doesn't, the number, but
Correct.
Whatever you're experiencing, let's talk about it. Let's find ways. And there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger picture. It's not just that one surgery. Sometimes, we might think, oh, if I just get this removed, we're good. But
Correct.
there's feelings, there's emotions, life is happening. And so put yourself first in that. Lean on those specific people that that you can trust, and just truly know that God has such a greater purpose for whatever you're experiencing, going through. It's not in vain at all.
Yeah.
So, and I just open myself up to anybody who wants to speak, after, or, you can, message me, or even Shani, because we are open books, and we're willing to talk about this because it's greater, and we want to be able to have these conversations in many languages is what I hope. So that's really what I would say, is just talk. Let's come together. Let's figure this out one way or another.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Patria, for sharing. That you are my sister friend. Not only, my sister in Christ, but your family, it's different. So, but I'm thankful because even though we are familiar with each other, I'm glad that we know that when there's something that we need to get to business and we need to be real about something, that we're able to do that. And I know this is not the last time that we will collaborate. Girl, I see you doing panels and conferences and all the things.
Listen,
so this is just the beginning for both of us, because out of my own pain is why this is happening, why this is even taking place. And I'm thankful that you are able to use a painful situation and turn it around for other people's good. If people do want to DM you, share your Instagram, and if you have an email or something that you would be open to sharing, share that as well if people want to reach out to you if they have questions about your specific situation.
Definitely. So my Instagram, shout out to my brother, he created it. The username or whatever it is, it's a lost lens 94. So ALOSTLENS 94. That's me on Instagram. And then my first and last name at gmail.com. So I'm Patria 𝙁𝙤𝙧𝙦 all together. PATRIAALGUILA at gmail.com. A lot of A's. Yes. Yeah. So I'm definitely open. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, Google has some pictures of me that need to go down. I need to put some new ones.
I am done with you. And for those of you who came on here to support Patria, but hopefully gain some knowledge or something from me too, and want to continue to keep this conversation going, and even more so, if you have a story that has to do with reproductive health, please don't hesitate to let me know if it's something that you want to share. You can follow me at ShaniSpeaksNow is my Instagram. That's actually my handle on all social media. The best email for me, if you want to share your story, is hi Shani at ShaniSpeaksNow. Of course, you can just DM me. And you can also follow me on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Shani Speaks Now, and I'm actually going to share this on YouTube as well. So if you don't want to share the actual Instagram link, because it's going to be on my feed, once I get it uploaded this week, it'll be there, and you can share that. So please share so that people can kind of get the word out and hear these stories, because it's really, really, it's detrimental. But I want women to be able to continue to share, for us to build that community, for us to feel like we're not alone. Thanks so much to everyone that jumped on here. There was so much encouragement on here. We saw your comments. I didn't stop to read all of them, but I see so many people thanking you, Patria, saying how helpful it was. And I'm grateful for that. I actually have my next one coming up April 23rd. So I'm going to try to do them on Sundays at 6:00. That one will be my PCOS and miscarriage story. So it's actually a double story that one of my friends will be sharing. And then in May, I have someone that's on this call that we will be sharing their cancer story, breast cancer to be exact. We have to touch base with her so we can figure out our exact date. But the plan is to do this once a month through the end of the year and beyond. If I get more stories, I will up it to twice a month, because I don't want anyone not to be able to share if they want to. But I'm just really grateful. I'm grateful for these platforms, and I'm grateful for women like my friend Patria here who are willing to share their stories. And Patria, for you, my friend, I pray that God continues to give healing, continues to give creativity, continues to give you the desires to do the things that you want to do with your testimony and with your story, so that you can continue to not just help other women, but help yourself in terms of what's the next big thing for you, because you are so gifted. You're so talented. You have one of the biggest, most genuine hearts and generous hearts that I know of anybody. That's why we've been friends for so long. So I like to keep good people around me. And I just see you flourish in whatever it is that you want to do with this story, and you know that God will do it. So thank you all so much for those of you who stayed on the whole time with us for a little bit over an hour. We don't count it as slight, because we know you could be doing anything on this Sunday. Y'all probably cooking your Sunday dinners. So thank you for being here. And that is it. So I'm going to go ahead and share this on our stories. But we love you guys. We appreciate you guys. And just continue to look out on both of our pages for anything that we may have coming up in the future regarding this, or regarding anything in regards to our stories of reproductive health. All right. Take care, everyone. God bless y'all. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you so much to my special guest, 𝙂𝙀𝙧 𝙀𝙧 for your bravery and your courage in sharing your story with us live. And if you'd like to share your story live, remember you can email me directly at HiShani@ShaniSpeaksNow.com or DM me directly on Instagram. Didn't get a chance to watch? Well, you can listen wherever you listen to podcasts on Shani Speaks Now, the podcast. You know the motto, always keep the faith and let the Lord fight your battles. Thanks for watching, Faith Fam. Be sure to subscribe, share, and like this episode, and I'll see you back on my channel soon.